These are excellent questions. But Shubhi, you missed the point. The point I'm making is, again, when I say it's manufactured dissent, I repeated half a dozen times in my lecture that manufactured dissent on the basis of underlying structural conditions. These are not artificial. There's a difference between manufactured and being artificial. These are not sociologically artificial. Yes, that upper caste toxicity is real. But I'm saying that upper caste toxicity is being weaponized. So is the counter protests are being weaponized. We are falling into a place in the narrative. I am neither condemning the need for fight against discrimination by the marginalized, nor am I denying the toxicity of the caste Hindus. That's why I'm saying that you'll have to think fresh. Your question still is 50 years old. We'll have to make fresh grounds. And your question on representation, it's a legitimate question again. That's why we have to put our minds together. That yes, should marginalized not get representation in higher places? The only answer, democratic answer to that would be yes, they should gain. But what happens when somebody comes along and gives you representation without the dignified recognition or redistributive, egalitarian, social, economic demands? That's my question to you. Groups like Babsa should get their space. Groups like those social backgrounds should get their due representation. But what happens when somebody comes along and weaponizes that question of representation and builds a neoconservative, majoritarian, caste Hindu theocratic regime? That's my question to you. So if we think only halfway through, representation तो मिलना है, मिल गया, चलो अब घर चलते हैं, तो घर बचेगा नहीं. ये मिल गया, हो गया काम. Therefore, we cannot now afford to think in terms of these fragments. We'll have to generate that new universal. Only then will the agenda of the regime begin to look sectarian. It is a sectarian agenda. But the sectarian agenda today, they successfully looks like universal agenda. That's the reason they can say sabka saath, sabka vikas. But we are talking about sectoral demands, OBC ka demand, SC ka demand. So they will say, look, these are all sectarian fragments, we are the universal. My question to you is, we cannot build a counter hegemony without reoccupying that universal. They are disallowing us to reoccupy that universal by legitimately articulating legitimate progressive language that we have built by 50 years of struggles of feminists, of Dalits, of OBCs, of left. They have appropriated all that language. They are producing this Fraserian uncanny double. They are weaponizing that language, weaponizing the language we produce against us. So what is the way out? The only way out is that we, all of us, in spite of our differences, in spite of our disagreements, will have to come together in spaces like this, thrash them out so that you have new forms of solidarity. Without that, if you tell me that, why should we raise the question of poor Brahmin? Legitimate question, but an illegitimate outcome. So we'll have to think of the consequences of long-term strategy and struggle, because the other side, the regime, is in a very long-term battle. They are reconfiguring the entire social dynamics of the society. So they will allow you this protest. I'm also telling you this. They want this protest. Why is that time and again they come and generate this conflict in JNU? They want a voice like JNU to come up. But they will use this voice to polarize society. They'll go and tell upper caste, देखो ये लोग कैसे कर रहे, बहुत डरावना माहौल बन रहा देश में, जो आपके पास है मंगलसूत्र वो चला जाएगा. आप लोग इधर नारा देते रह जाओगे. How do you overcome that? This has to be your concern. Nobody else is going to think for us, right? We'll have to think that if our struggles that are being raised so genuinely are being weaponized, and there is an uncanny double produced out of it to serve the purpose of a neoconservative regime, it's only our responsibility that we come out of this conundrum. And therefore I feel these protests are important, but much more important is this protest side should be used for more discussions, more open-mind discussions. I think now this is a time where we'll have to open up these spaces for cross-dialogue.
Hello, sir. Thank you. अच्छा लगा आपको सुन के काफ़ी टाइम बाद. So I totally agree with the thing that you said, that representation, BJP is using representation to create a theocratic state. But I do not agree on a lot of points which you said, that the psychological empowerment thing which you said, like the Jat being defeated or the Congress party being defeated in Haryana, and the use of women wrestlers, and when you said that Dalit people or the Dalit household or a Dalit man is saying that it happens with our women daily. That is true. I am not disagreeing that that happens by dominant caste Jats in Haryana. That happens daily. They that happens. Operation happens on Dalits in Haryana by Jats. That I agree. But I have never seen a Dalit from Haryana or a Dalit woman from Haryana that would say that it is good. Because Haryana is also the sports capital of India. So wrestlers has other kind of respects also in that society, that it's not just only a Jat woman, it is a wrestler and it is like the proud of our state. So I'll not agree to that point, that BJP is using that thing to get votes of Dalits, that see, we have done this to Jats. They might try to use it because the situation got out of hand.
Exactly.
And the second point is, because you are not seeing the opposite side of that thing, why are they dragging those wrestlers on the roads? Because they had to protect Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh. And Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh had a much more larger impact in UP. And he holds a lot of electoral power in that area, so they have to control that thing. So I will not agree to this thing that this is psychological empowerment. And the other thing that you said, that the Andolan, Kisan Andolan, which was going on, and they used it as it was a Andolan of Jats who are rich peasantry. I totally agree with you on that point, that the Jats are rich peasantry in Haryana. They hold the majority of the lands, and it was totally their protest. Other like Mazdoors or the peasants were like there to support them. But if you see in Punjab was also there, and Punjab there is Jat Sikh. They also hold, they also dominate. They also do oppression on Dalits. They also hold the land, and it was their protest also, because they started it. Jat Sikhs from Punjab, they started it, but you will not see it converting into Punjab elections. There is no hatred against Jat Sikhs at that kind of, because in Haryana you will see the Jat Andolan of 2016, that was a marking point, and BJP has used that very well. And the Saini versus Jats, and that they made it 35 versus 1. And I will also like you to think about what Congress is doing. I'll not say that BJP has done a lot of bad things. They have manipulated the electoral process in Haryana. We all know that. But even before winning the election, the debate in Haryana was who will become the chief minister, Dipender Singh Hooda or Bhupender Singh Hooda. This was the debate. And in my own district, there are 5 assembly constituencies that they have mismanaged it so badly. You cannot even imagine. And they have mismanaged the whole Karyana Kathal belt. They have mismanaged it very badly. So I disagree with this psychological empowerment thing, because I think they are trying to get benefit of a situation which is out of their hand. And the second thing you said, that when the weaker sections or the weaker OBCs get representation, and they will not say that this is happening, this is wrong happening in institution and all that. So I would say whoever has got any power in state, they will never say, whether it is upper caste, lower caste, dominant OBC or lower OBC, or whoever. So if a Yadav, a Chamar or a Dalit or anybody who has not got representation is now getting representation, and we say that they will not be able to speak up against this state. I have never seen upper caste speaking against Congress or this Hindutva regime. So we should not expect people who are in institutions, because we see how many professors are speaking against this state. Nobody is speaking. In JNU, the number has drastically reduced, people who used to speak against this state. So we should never expect people who have got positions in the state institutions to speak up. So that's my point.
Good. This is the disagreement we need. These are the dialectical disagreements. So I also fiercely disagree with you, right? because upper caste professors in JNU have no need to speak. Yeah, हम लोगों का time pass नहीं होता तो हम बात कर रहे हैं. Why should upper caste speak at all? So that's your first undialectical statement to think that, comparing that upper caste in state don't speak out. So why should the marginalized speak out? I think you are in two different social conditions. But your point that those in state take that character of state, that's a legitimate point. So then, so that's what I'm saying. So therefore, the point is then if BJP is able to usurp the lower end and make them part of the state without the necessary accompanying social demands of those groups, how do you face the situation? That is the question. We cannot say don't give representation. Even after giving representation, how do you radicalize that agenda? This is something for us to think afresh. I don't think we know how to do it. Similarly, on the first question, I disagree with you that Braj Bhushan ko protect karne ke liye, all that exists. Those contingencies always exist, Braj Bhushan ko karne ke liye. But if you observe closely the way they have handled the wrestlers issue, which they could have resolved in so many different ways, giving so much of TV coverage, why would a regime think of this? That's why I'm saying we have to train ourselves to think dialectically. Why would a regime which has a complete grip over media want to get bad press? Why do they want to show police dragging those women repeatedly for 10 days, 15 days? This is my question to you. Why would they want to do it? They could have controlled it. They could have done it in slide. No, they are not covering JNU protests. ये जो प्रोटेस्ट हुआ उस पे तो जो अपर कास्ट को हुआ उसको प्रेस कवरेज में मिला, उनको कुछ हुआ नहीं. जेएनयू में प्रोटेस्ट होता, कवरेज नहीं मिलता, पनिशमेंट भी हो जाता. इसमें फर्क है ना. उस फर्क को अगर हम लोग एनालाइज नहीं करेंगे कि व्हाई ईच मूवमेंट इज ट्रीटेड डिफरेंटली, व्हाई ईच मीडिया कवरेज कम्स डिफरेंटली, देन यू गेट द नरेटिव ऑफ हाउ इट इज बीइंग वेपनाइज्ड. फेस वैल्यू पे आप जनरलिटी में एनालाइज करोगे, विच इज व्हाट इज द ओल्ड कन्वेंशनल मोड ऑफ एनालिसिस, वी विल नॉट गेट द डिटेल्स ऑफ इट. आई थिंक दिस regime has a completely dialectical of how they are going to manipulate, right? So therefore I disagree on that point that it was just that it got out of hand. Nothing gets out of hand under this regime. They push things to get out of hand. They want things to get out of hand. You have it.
Thank you for the talk, sir. I have one question. Protestant country feel fragmented and the regime is constantly throwing new issues at us, and we forget about the previous issue and then we start a new protest and a new resistance building again. So how do you think that there can be a unified and continuous movement against the regime that is constantly harassing the people?
Well, again, good question. So I don't have answers to many of the questions you are asking me. But the point is this, that of course our resources are limited, our energies are limited. So this regime will also weaponize that. They know, they understand our limitations. So look at the way this protest is being treated by the regime. They have an understanding that there is a limitation. There is energy will be limited. There are concerns, anxieties. So they will weaponize all that knowledge. Today we are in an era of information. And ruling elites all over are conflict over data. Why do they need data? They need data for this kind of micromanagement. Today protests are not being broadly managed. Protests are also micromanaged. They will have an exact picture of how many of us here, how much we can push, how long we can stay. So they have already they have already preempted a lot of things. So we are at a big disadvantage in those resource terms in terms of, but where we can gain an advantage is that real commitment that we have for social transformation. That is where I think we'll have to open up our minds. We don't have to have preconceived design of social change, that it should happen only this way. It should only talk the language of social justice. It only should talk the language of X, Y, and Z. We are free to think dialectically open because we have nothing to lose. As Marx said, you have nothing to lose except your chains. That's the condition we are in. When we do not have much to lose, why not stand up and think fresh? Why not think? And each one of you is capable. It is just that old frames become so hegemonic on but we also, even transformation can become hegemonic. But we think only in designed terms. It's a time I think we can break free from that. Think in new. We might go wrong. We might not get the thrust right. we should be okay with it. Like he disagrees with my thing. Possible that I might have gone wrong in my analysis. But that's the openness with which we'll have to receive the new situation. That you don't have to be constrained and said that we have to get this absolutely right. We'll have to think, rethink, re-experiment. Even Lenin said 1 step back, 2 steps backward, right? What does that mean? It simply means this dialectical move, that something doesn't work, you move back, think in a fresh way so that you take 1 step, 2 steps back, forward. So when we have Lenin speaking that language, when you have Marx speaking, there's no reason why we should not follow up that legacy.
Sir, I need one clearance when you are talking about this universal agenda. Then if somebody just surpasses his identity, if you're talking about Umar Khalid, he just surpasses his identity as a Muslim and talking about the secular thing, then what is the place of that man who is surpassing his identity in the secular agenda? And if he is doing, if we are doing in such manner, then is it not very much forgetting the memory and just acting on the acts of the Brahmanical agenda? Just forgetting the memory what has happened with you in the past? And does it not dilute the phenomena of the multiculturalism as well? Because if we are thinking, what you are talking about, the thinking beyond, then beyond, is it not just diluting the phenomena of the multiculturalism, Islamophobia and everything?
Look, once you open such wonderful questions, such tough questions. But look, I would put it the other way around. Umar Khalid actually has no choice not being Muslim. That's the reality, So why do you forget that? So what this anxiety that you have been driven into, what will happen to my memory? What will happen to my identity? This is the majoritarian gaze on you. Why have that fear of that identity? Identities can be reconstructed in very many different ways, right? I am suggesting that identity can be reconfigured through more universalist language. Now that Umar Khalid is Muslim, is a student, is a social activist, is a tribal activist, he fights against neoliberalism. Does this dilute his Muslim identity? I don't think it dilutes his Muslim identity. Anand Templunde is a Dalit who speaks for right to education. And all identities have to be overcome in their old social configuration, because all identities are repositories of old forms of power. Power is grafted on into our identities. We have to overcome certain part of our identity. Otherwise, there is no transformation, whether it is Muslim, whether it is Brahmin. If our anxieties are in terms of reification of that identity, that's what majoritarian wants us to do. Majoritarianism today is not worried about those Muslims who will wear their identity on their sleeves because it works for them. They will give you the optics that they are worried about Muslimness. But OIC, I am telling you, will always be their first friend, not you. Why? There is no Muslim in this country more Muslim than OIC. Advani and Atal Bihari needed Bukhari. Modi, Amit Shah need OIC. They come in package. दो उधर रहते, एक इसके साथ फ्री आता है. Combo offer. दो लो, एक free. क्यों? Why do they need them? Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee requested Bukhari to come out of his retirement. You know that? He made him retire and said, आके आप थोड़ा मुस्लिम पॉलिटिक्स करो, कोई मिल नहीं रहा हमें. ओवैसी साहब भी वही काम कर रहे. So where is the question of this regime being threatened, or this regime doesn't want Muslimness? It wants a Muslimness of certain kind. Please make that distinction. That's why I'm telling, this is dialectical thinking. What Umar Khalid does is not erasure of Muslim identity. He is universalizing the Muslim identity. That a Muslim, along with being a Muslim, is not going to fight only for Muslim rights, but he has every right as a citizen to fight for the rights of the tribals. What can be greater than that? And what can threaten this regime better than that?
So that's the beyond approach.
That's the beyond approach.
What's the result?
Of course, what do you mean? You think that they will come and give you a prize? These struggles, this will be there. What do you mean prize? What did you expect? That price we'll all have to pay. That is the part of the struggle, right? But what you have to get dialectically right is the why they're worried about Umar Khalid is not because he's Muslim, but because he's a Muslim talking about tribals and neoliberalism. The day you understand this, you will understand how to fight for Muslim mind. There are ways in which one can fight for recognition. There's no one given way. And each context one has to rethink how that fight has to be carried out. Today this regime wants to have reified Muslim identity. Therefore I was also critical of CAA movement that if you have reified Muslim language, they are happy with you. Karo, aur karo, paise bhi denge aapko. But मुसलमान अगर इस देश में उतरेंगे, देश के राइट टू एजुकेशन के लिए आप 10 लोग उतरो, परसों आप पे यूएपीए लगेगा, कल आप मस्जिद के लिए उतरो, पैसे भी मिलेगा आपको. ये फर्क है. बोलेंगे आपके खिलाफ, करेंगे उसके खिलाफ. They will abuse OIC but penalize Umar Khalid. This, and if we don't make these nuanced distinctions of how an identity can be reasserted, then you fall in their trap. That's why I'm saying rethinking protest in populist times.
This government, this regime also has a direct...
Yes, Samim Da should get a right to ask. No, you should ask. I insist.
This regime has also direct political benefit from OIC.
Absolutely, that's the thing, that they want that. So they push Muslims. Now again, this is the quandary we are in. If they push Muslims, suppose if Muslims are voting for OIC, can we be critical? If you are critical, it also means you are communal. Why can't Muslims vote for Muslim party? Absolutely nothing wrong in a democracy. But what is the outcome? So you don't have the democratic progressive language even to critique that. If you don't critique it, the outcome is that secular parties lose because of fragmentation of votes. If you critique OIC, Muslims might feel that only one leader, एक बचा हुआ हमारा leader, उसके पीछे भी ये लोग पड़ जाते हैं. So look at the complexity of optics, the maze of optics that they have laid out for you. To break this is not that easy. That it needs spaces like JNU to openly discuss, leaving behind our constrained thinking, modes of pet thinking, right? That there is no space for self-righteousness because none of us know what is the mode in which we have to push and build this counter. Only through this free dialogue spaces like this, where we can freely dialogue and differ without prejudice.
So sir, I agree with you with regard to reification of identities as it causes the internal displacement as well as the external displacement. But I also have a question in context to Nancy Fraserian framework that can marginalized communities in these times can really afford deconstruction. And my second question with this as well attached to this is, like, when I agree with Nancy Fraser that of course the transformative policies, good way of doing recognition which we consider as deconstruction, according to Nancy Fraser, should be aligned with the good way of doing the redistributive policies where we consider class politics as the best way, according to Fraser. But I also consider the critique of Anne Phillips, that how can you think about cultural dignity while without culture? We have discussed this in many times in class, but still, as you say that we don't have any conclusion. We are always in lieu of conclusion. But I would again like you to talk about this.
Good, you are missing classes, so you don't believe in a classless society. Huh? So the point is this, that the deconstruction that Fraser is talking about is precisely the deconstruction that is visible in Umar Khalid case. That you can have those multiple identities. Majoritarian gaze is precisely in reifying your singularity of your Muslim identity. I don't think that's an healthy way you can build. So I think Fraserian, we have to also contextualize what she means by deconstruction in certain contexts. Right? So it's not that deconstruction has any ready-made answer of what it looks like. Every context, it can be built in very different ways. That is the hard work we have to do, that Fraser is not going to do for us. I think in our context, we'll have to argue that how should religious minorities resist majoritarianism.
So sir, at present, what do you you think? What's the good way for Muslims to resist this majoritarian?
I think they should be in the forefront of struggles for universal right to education, forefront for right to health, forefront for right to employment, right to work. It should all be Muslim struggles. And I also believe these are the struggles on which OBCs should lead these struggles. These are all Dalit struggles. I give an example with my students that once I was invited by OBC Forum to give a talk. Once I finished, I made this, that right to education, universal education should be our demand. They said, sir, ये सब बात तो किए लेकिन आप OBCism के बारे में कुछ नहीं बताया मैं. So this is where we have been pushed back to think, because there is no trust in society, social inequalities are steep. There is a context why people are thinking in those terms. But that's our challenge. The transformative movements have to break those strongholds and tell them that, look, we'll have to have those shared spaces. We might still have differences, but those shared spaces have to be built for these larger demands. That's precisely what Anand Teltumde is doing. They are not angry with Anand Teltumde for no reason. After all, he's an author, how much reach he has, why should they arrest him? Because he is a Dalit who is leading at the forefront talking about neoliberalism. When rest of them are busy with identitarian politics. There's a difference why the regime is angry with someone like that. And we'll have to make sense of that.
That's why I always say to my Muslim friends that why do you are in the front foot only on Muslim issues?
Absolutely.
You must have inclusive issues.
That is a point message Samim I gave when I was invited to Jamaat. And they said that tell us sir कैसे करना है Jamaat में. मैं बोला you are also, Huzaif was there, Samim was there. I told Jamaat that you should be in the forefront. They took me around to show their schools and masjid. I said ये तो ठीक है masjid और school आप रखो. You should be in the forefront to fight for all other citizenship demands. What prevents Muslims from? I mean, when you narrate freedom struggle today, why do you narrate Muslim contribution? But they were not fighting for any Muslim-centric demands. That didn't make freedom struggle any less secular, right? That in fact made freedom struggle secular. Secular, progressive, sectarian fight precisely means this, that secularism, if you look at secular philosophy, it is an ability to trust strangers and forge larger solidarity. That is being secular, right? Beyond ascriptive identities.
सिर्फ मुस्लिम इशू पे जाएंगे तो इस रेजिम के लिए पोलराइजेशन करना आसान हो जाएगा.
Exactly. So we'll have to think of that why today raising Muslim issue in certain registers becomes entrapped in polarization that regime wants. So that has to be our concern. We cannot say this is my method, I will do it only this way, come what may. You have a question? Yeah.
Thank you, sir. I'm in complete agreement with you when you say things about Umar Khalid, that he also fought for other people. And I think even as feminists, we should fight for not just for gender issue, but also against neoliberal capitalism, which contributes in operation of women and other genders. But my question is that what do you think of arrest of Sharjeel Imam and others like Gulfisha Fatima, who don't receive the same solidarity or support that Umar Khalid receives, and they are often sidelined, and they are not talked about in popular media and by people, because I think it's more risky to talk about Sharjeel Imam than it is to talk about Umar Khalid. So what do you think of that?
No, I don't think it is about more risky. I think we don't have a language to talk about Sharjeel's case more strongly. Because the times are such that in a polarized times, how do you defend someone who fights for his Muslim identity more strongly? Of course, I have read articles which says he was also had other concerns. So I don't know the details. I followed Umar more closely because I also knew him personally. Therefore, I feel that this contrast, I think comparison one should avoid. But on the other side, I do feel the other cases have this complexity because we really genuinely lack the language of defending someone who is on the other side. Umar's case is more easy, and he also receives more support because of this larger concern. That's precisely, I think his case is a test case to say what minority politics should look like in this country.
I think with that, let's conclude this session. I think the session opened up more questions than it gave answers, but the discussion that followed the session was very fruitful in terms of when Sir was talking about how the protests have gotten mechanical, but the regime has gotten dialectical. It is only spaces of dissent, discussion and debate such as these that will open up more pathways for us to have creative dissent. So thanks a lot,
Thanks,
sir.
sir.
We're really grateful to have you.